All right. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where in the world you're calling in from. My name is Nick, and you are on our Finance Transformation Tuesday webinar. Today's topic, why legacy invoice processing sucks and how AI can fix it. So, finance forward, your invoice process is only as smart as the system underneath it. Today, we're going to open with the premise that your invoice processing really is only as smart as the system underneath it. And if that system relies on templates, template-based OCR that was built 10 years ago or more, it is not smart. It is slow, it's brittle, and quietly costing your team hours every week. So, this is not a sales pitch. On full disclosure right now, it's a vendor neutral session. We're not going to name names. We are going to describe architecture, so how things work, rules-based, template-driven, and let people recognize in their own stack. If you're an offender or your OCR provider is an offender, you will know, even if we don't have to call them out here. So, all right, let's go into some housekeeping to help you get the most out of your webinar. Hello, Botsworth. We see our good friend Botsworth every month, and he will send out a recording of the webinar afterward. The slides will be shared after, so no worries about that. We do have a webinar QA button at the bottom. Open up the panel for questions as they come up. Feel free to stick the questions in there throughout the session. We have a dedicated QA session at the end, but there's no reason to wait. We love to take your questions throughout the entire webinar presentation. And then, of course, we have polls just to keep you on your toes, keep things lively and interesting. So with that, let's jump into a quick agenda of what we're going to talk about. So first, we're going to jump into why rules-based template-driven invoice capture cannot keep up with your AP demands. Automated on paper, manual in practice. You're going to see how OCR historically was okay, but has not fulfilled the promise of the technology. Where template-based OCR breaks down, you'll see that. Then you're going to see the real cost for hiding inside automated. What is really automated and what is not. We're going to separate the truth from fiction. Signs that your invoice system is legacy OCR. Who knows? I guess we'll find out today who's got the real deal and who's got the old stuff. And then, of course, we're going to end with what native AI native invoice processing looks like when it's built exclusively for finance. Now, I have brought along my good friend and colleague, Mr. Mike Lynch. Mike, would you like to say hello and walk us through the next few slides?
Hello, everybody, and glad to be with you here today. So let's talk about that first piece, right? When we talk about automated, right? And one thing to keep in mind, when we talk about this, you have to remember just the rate of change we've seen in finance over the past 10 years. And so understand, we're not saying the decision you made 5 or 10 years ago is a bad decision. All we're saying is that what it's probably not doing for you today is what you thought it was going to be doing for you back then. And so really thinking about what that automation that we bought 5 or 10 years ago, what is that giving us today? And in many cases, it says it might be automated, but you're really more going to be in a manual space. And so I'm going to be sharing a lot of some facts and figures that are really industry wide. These aren't sourced from us. These are coming, Ardent Partners did a study of kind of e-payables, state of e-payables in 2025. We're eagerly awaiting their 2026 version, but I suspect you're going to see a lot of the same pieces here. So a lot of you have put automation in some fashion. You've tried to bring that into your AP space, understanding full well that you want to be able to move that forward. Now, when we talk about what is that touchless AP, what can I do in terms of kind of zipping it through? Only about 35% of invoices on average people are allowed to process without a human touch. Now, that gap between what you're trying to do and seeing that, so really understanding that 65% of your invoices are requiring that manual touch. I'm not seeing a lot of lift out of that automation today, which means I'm doing manual coding, I'm doing manual fixing, I might be fixing some sort of kind of match exception or something downstream in my ERP, because as you can also see, only 4% of the tools that are out there that folks have any sort of automated exception management. Again, when we think about what agentic AI can do today, and we'll talk a little bit about that when we get a little bit more downstream for today, that's one of the things agents can do for you. It's not just seeing something, doing something. It's reasoning. It's understanding why there's a problem. Let me source what might be the problem and fix it. And so only, many of you today may not have anything that's allowing you to fix those exceptions on an automated fashion or checking something else. And so what that 4% means, 4% in a finance space is fundamentally 0%. And so that means us as finance practitioners, we have to go back in and we're going to have to deal with every single exception as it pops up and we'll be able to move forward. And then, while we've seen a lot of people in the industry shift towards a no PO, no pay type of policy, most of us still aren't running POs for our utility bills or things like that. And so, non PO backed invoicing is still struggling in that legacy kind of automation space, in that data capture or OCR space. And so, again, this isn't a reflection on the team. The team is trying to do the best it can with the tools that it has. But your AP team is likely struggling, and some of you may not be aware of how much they're struggling in that kind of day to day. And so, again, not a measure of how your team does. Your team is great, they're working with what they can, but really what we're talking about here is what can those tools that you've purchased do for you at kind of that first pass through the things that come around. So let's think about you and let's talk about what you're doing in your space, and we'll bring up our first poll question today.
All right, so poll question number one. Feel free to use the button at the bottom of your screen to answer the first poll question. So, question is, what share of your invoices post end to end with no human touch? Is it less than 25%? Is it 25 to 49? Is it 50 to 74%? 75% or more? Or honestly, we have no clue because we do not measure it. So, we'll give people about 5 or 6 more seconds to answer. There's an easy one, folks. This is a warm-up question. What share of your invoices post end to end with no human touch? Is it less than 25%, 25 to 49, 50 to 74, 75% or more? Or honestly, we have no clue because we do not measure it. So we'll give you the countdown of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and here's our data. Surprise, surprise. About
Yeah, not a whole
25%,
lot.
yeah, about 25% are doing less than 25%, 25% are doing 25 to 49%. Half the people don't know. So takeaway here is 50% or greater, no one is doing it on this call. Mike, thoughts about this?
Yeah, no, and again, we showed you the numbers before, is 34% was kind of what people are seeing today. So that falls kind of in line. And then not measuring it, that's one of those things too, whereas you think about as you move forward in that space and as you think about tools within your ecosystem, that's going to be the areas where you really want to think about how can I measure those things so that when I go back to my leadership and say I would like, access to some resources to procure greater capability or procure a newer version of something that's going to give me that capability. That's where you really want to be able to think about how am I going to measure this so that I can show to my organization what that return on investment is going to look like. So it's a great kind of idea. So thinking about some of the legacy template-based OCR tools that are out there. Again, this isn't to name names. It's really to kind of talk about the framework and the technologies that folks are using. Most of them are built on a template and they use math and algorithms to think about things that should be on a page. For example, think about an invoice. Most of you today, if you think about an invoice, again, doesn't matter what part of the world you're in, you're thinking there's some stuff up top talking about who's billing me, what's my company name, some basic information kind of at the header line. And then down when you get below, you're going to kind of have some line level detail in varying levels of detail, right? You think about kind of like your phone bill, right? If you look at your cell phone bill, like every single text, every single phone call is all laid out there, right? I don't care about that. That's noise. But that line level information is different, right? So templates are looking for certain types of things in certain places on a page so that it's good. And that works great until your provider changes their invoicing, right? They put in a new system to do invoicing for them. They put in a new look and feel. They come up with new branding, right? And they put it on your logo, and all of a sudden your template-based OCR starts messing up, right? That doesn't even talk about, right? We add a new vendor into our ecosystem. Some of you are healthcare customers that are on the call today. Some of you are in financial services. Some of you in different industries. You're going to add a new vendor that's going to have a new service for your organization. And so when you do that, you probably need a ticket. You probably need to open something up, and you probably need to think about how do I tell my system what's going on in that invoice. The non-PO backed space, That's where those invoices, there's nothing to match it against. And so essentially the OCR tool, your tool is looking at it going, I'm reading information off of this page. And if it's not on that page, I don't know. And so when you talk about the value of a touchless automation, that's where I don't, if I can't reference or I can't go look at something else, I'm going to be in trouble. And so, as you see, based on again Ardent Partners, putting that together, and it's just, again, we talk about it as this being a very kind of industry agnostic and solution agnostic conversation. Ardent Partners doesn't even cover us; they actually cover some of Auditoria's competitors, believe it or not. So they're actually talking about the value of some other tools that are out there. But really, when we talk about it, 65% are PO backed invoices, which means if you don't have a tool that can handle that non-PO backed space, you're leaving 35% of automation on the table before you even get started. Line items, pricing, those are challenges in that space because what am I extracting? What am I pulling forward? Unlike the header, everybody does pretty good on the header at the top of it, presuming it's not handwritten or in multiple languages. Those are kind of there. The exceptions, that's an area where when you think about it, it's like, oh, an exception should be just that. When we think about automation and we think about governed autonomy, exception should be an exception. But when you start to have 20% of your invoices become an exception at a minimum, and then we talk about the ones that it can't handle, well, all of a sudden my exception has now become the rule. I don't necessarily have exception cases anymore. It's just kind of more work that my team has to work on. And then as in that survey, almost half of the AP teams, talk about that high exception rate, a top three challenge for them. Again, that's just one of those things that, that just becomes a challenge for folks in that space. So, Nick, any thoughts there on that piece of it?
Well, I think you've stated it pretty well, Mike, that these templates are brittle and that they over time they might be working okay, but anything changes in the outside world, you got to go back and re-engineer things. So let's talk about some of those hidden costs inside what's being automated, Mike. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah. So this is where, if you really kind of get down to brass tacks, right? And many of you think, okay, this all sounds good, but how do I go forward? How do I think about something else? This is where we start to build that case, and we're going to get to section 4, you kind of get to dig in some deeper, but this is where you kind of think about what is this costing my organization today to do this? So my automated tools that I might have today, as you see, a $9.84 average cost per invoice to process. Just want you to think about that for a second within your organization. Think about how many invoices you process. Now, fundamentally, multiply that by $10 each.
Wow.
And so when you do that, that's the cost of your current automation solution based on the tools that you've purchased. And again, in many cases, your team may be just shouldering this burden and not telling you about it. Now, there are ranges. You can see kind of, as the survey came through and shown, some people are getting it down, they're zipping it through it, they're pretty good. Be able to see kind of that $2.65 and kind of best in class of what they're seeing in automation today. Some of them are lagging behind that. So that's a long period of time. The next one is also potentially a dollars and cents killer when we think about what I'm doing with my AP spend. 8.2 days on an average cycle time. Now, if I'm doing that on average, there's pretty much no way I'm going to be able to get through my entire payment cycle. Let's say I've got a vendor who's offering me a 2% discount if I can do it a net 10 payment. I'm never going to get to a 10-day payment cycle if I'm taking 8.2 days to process an invoice, let alone do my settlement run and actually pay my suppliers. And so I'm never going to be able to take advantage of those early pay discounts. And so I need to get that down. I need to get that faster of where that needs to be. So again, this is real cost. These aren't Nick and Mike made up some numbers before we got on the call to scare you into it, right? These are real people telling you this is what it costs us to do this. The next one is another one that you probably didn't think about, right? When we think about bringing an AP team in, we think they're going to come in, they're going to process AP, they're going to go through, they're going to pay bills, and the operate, our business is going to operate. What you don't realize is that about a fifth of that time is spent dealing with inquiries, both from your internal staff and your external suppliers. And so that supplier inquiry time is not time spent processing invoicing. It's not time spent processing, new payment details for a bank, for your suppliers and things of that nature. And so that continues to be a tax, a manual tax on your team that's there. And then that staffing shortage. We've heard over the past 4-ish years, 5 years, that nobody's going into finance anymore. Nobody really wants to be in this space. People are retiring, so we're losing a lot of tenured folks out of AP teams that are really good at what they do, and they're taking that institutional knowledge, they're taking that capacity with them, and so that staffing shortage, is a real number, and it's also real when we think about our businesses as they continue to scale and grow. If we don't have more people, we're trying to process more AP with the same number of people with these costs, and that gets expensive, right? So you really realize that this isn't kind of a, this isn't the boogeyman. We're not at Halloween time yet, but we're getting closer. And these are some scary numbers when you think about it at scale.
Yeah, I would say, to come, some of your stats on the screen are a little bit alarming. Like $9.84 average cost per invoice. That means half the invoices are cheaper, but half of them are more expensive than $9.84. So think about an invoice you have that's 50 or $100. You're paying $10 to process a $100 invoice. That's like a 10% tax right there. And even think about these nickel and dime invoices that come in that might be below $10. Does it even make sense to pay those? I mean, it's you're spending more to pay them than you are for what you bought. Now, the other two that jump out at me here is the 21.9% of AP staff time goes to supplier inquiries. 1 out of 5 days. 1 day of every week goes to supplier inquiries. I mean, that really in
Yeah.
2026, we think that's a good idea. And then the 22% staffing shortages, that's a real thing. It's coming. I
Yeah.
don't know if you're going to call it you know, the account-ageddon or something like that. But it's like it. I hear it from CFOs and controllers all the time. Kids coming out of accounting school do not want to key invoices in. There's a lot of things they don't want to do, and data entry is not is one of them they do not want to do. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think this really paints the picture of the dilemma that we're all up against.
So let's take the time to make it real for you. Like, let's talk about what that looks like in your organizations. So where do you think today, if you were to look at it, again, if you had to pick one, where does most of your manual effort actually go today?
Yeah. Are you keying in or correcting captured invoice data? Are you chasing down approvals for your stakeholders? Are you resolving exceptions and mismatches? Are you answering suppliers saying, "Where's my payment?" Those inquiries. Are you just maintaining the gosh darn system itself? Templates, rules, config, users, permissions. So let's give a few more seconds for the folks on the call here to answer, and I'll give you a little quick countdown of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and here we've got a corpus of data, and surprise, surprise. 40%, we've tied the first and last answers. Keying or correcting captured invoice data takes up most of their time, or just maintaining the gosh darn system. Resolving exceptions and mismatches takes up a little bit of time, but Mike, thoughts on what the participants have said here?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest one I want to point out is that last one. When you're talking about maintaining the system, taking, 40% of you who answered the question said maintaining the system is where you're spending the most amount of time. I just want to put that into perspective and make sure people understand that means you are manually maintaining automation. Let me just let that sink in for a second, right? You've bought automation, but you're spending most of your manual time maintaining it. That's not automation, folks. I hate to break it to you, right? That's basically like I'm resetting a steam catapult every single time. That's not automation. I'm basically resetting the machine every single time as it goes through. So I suspect, don't know, but that might be why some of you are here. Like, hey, I'm kind of in this spot. I'm stuck. I kind of want to figure out what do I do next? Where do I go next? And I think that's one of those things that it's a great, kind of, let's move into some tactical, actionable ways for me to be able to assess where I'm at and be able to move forward. So some of you might be here for just that very reason. And some of you perhaps watching on replay may be kind of going, oh yeah, I'm doing that too. I'm kind of maintaining those things throughout it. So let's kind of we'll take a look and we'll kind of keep on moving to that next section.
Yeah, I guess they say the first step to healing is admitting you have a problem. So how do we know if we have a problem? Like, what are some of the signs that we're living with legacy OCR with an AI label?
Yep. So, when, some things here, not going to kind of read them to you, but, some things I want you to think about as you're assessing where you're at today. I would say the single best question when you want to ask is say, what percentage of my invoices will get will post to my ERP with zero human touch, right? And so, how much of it requires me to maintain a system? How much of it requires me to fix an exception? How much of it requires me to do that? And so, as you look through those, as you're thinking about, okay, those of you who are maintaining the system, thinking about what that onboarding looks like, thinking about how when it routes to humans, when it moves to some of those other pieces. Confidence. Does confidence build in your system over time, or is that something you have to basically program to allow it to be able to do it autonomously the next time or do it automatically the next time? So is that something that you have? Is that, is your accuracy, is it kind of quoted as kind of an end-to-end rate, or are we talking about, well, we can extract this one field on there, that's there. This is one I want to encourage every single one of you to be very careful. There's a lot of marketing material out there. I'm not going to lie. Invoicing processing almost starts to feel like a commodity. There's a lot of people doing it out there, but I want to caution you. What you want to be careful of is you don't, when somebody says 99.9%, touchless automation, you're like, what part of it is touchless, right? And when you dig into those, you peel back the layers on that, like an onion or an ogre, depending on which layer you want to pull back. When you start peeling that back, you realize what they're actually telling you is it's 99.9% accuracy for a specific field,
Mm.
not the whole invoice. And so don't get caught in the hype. Again, make sure you're doing something that's great there. What happens when we deal with corrections? Do corrections reinforce capability of the system? Do corrections tell the system to operate in a different manner within my ecosystem? And then the last one, this is one where it's, you know, AI appears on a logo, it appears on some marketing, it might even appear in the system that you're using. And it's like, it's almost like, your laundry detergent now with AI, right? It's like it's not an actual capacity. It's more of like a label or a lipstick we've put onto it, or kind of a veneer of AI that makes you feel like I'm working with AI and agentic AI that's again starting to leverage current capabilities, current technologies, but in reality, it's kind of just a front end, an AI front end to that legacy system that's there. So it doesn't really move the needle for you. So make sure when you're assessing that and you're thinking about what do I have today and what might I move to tomorrow, those are the questions you definitely need to be asking. You definitely need to be thinking about how we get into that different space. Now, again, not necessarily you're seeing it here in the office of the CFO just yet, but you are starting to see regulators and others take very much, they're taking note of any time somebody is claiming AI or claiming capacity. They're looking at that and making sure that those claims are legitimate. And so, whether you're thinking about, federal regulators, functional regulators, FTC style regulators, those are the types of groups that are starting to pay attention to this and making sure that people aren't just selling you a pipe dream around artificial intelligence, but that it's actual AI that's actually able to solve your problems. So, Nick, what have you seen kind of in this space?
Well, what's interesting, Mike, is I think you were the one that told me about the Securities and Exchange Commission. The SEC
Yeah.
charged two different firms with overrepresenting AI capabilities. In fact, I think you also mentioned to me that something like 50 plus AI related securities class action lawsuits have been filed over the last several years. So interesting stuff where people are trying to represent things as AI when they're not really AI.
Yeah. So just be careful with that as you're assessing kind of in your OCFO space. And again, that's not to scare you to an inaction. We talked about the cost of where you're at today. So most of you on this call and most of you you're watching on the replay, you're going to need to take action and you're going to need to kind of move into a certain space. And so let's talk about what you want to be looking for, where you want to be going as you move forward into this ecosystem to think about, where do we go? What does it look like for me? Kind of where do I move into that space? So AI native. And what that means is these are tool sets that are built with AI from the beginning. This is not intended to be legacy technology slapped on with a kind of an AI coding, if you will. And so what you really want is it leverages that you think about it in terms of how humans think, kind of that neuroplasticity, that ability for us to think and to reason and to come up with other ideas. And that's what some AI native applications allow you to do. And what that looks like for you, it's going to be purpose built. This is not going to be like some document scanner from the DMV that you're going to use to process invoicing, right? That's
Mhm.
not finance related information. So you can't necessarily take a legacy tool like that and apply it. You want something built for purpose of where you want to go. What you want to get out of the space of is templates. Again, as you're going to add new suppliers, people change their billing systems, what have you, the templated system is going to continue to require more and more maintenance as time goes on. So it can, something that can read from formats it's never seen before. Thinking about, it understands that the number in this field is an appropriate number that corresponds to an invoice number, for example, or corresponds to a purchase order number, or corresponds, like if there's a phone number down below in the footer of the invoice that says for questions, call, it doesn't read that as an invoice number. It doesn't read that as a line number or something of that nature. And so you want to be very careful of it shouldn't be based off of templates. And so you really want to make sure it can basically take a cold invoice it's never seen before and process through. Now, it may not match any suppliers that you have or a PO that you have or things of that nature, but it should be able to extract it properly and be able to get ready to ingest it into your ERP system as it goes. Learning from corrections. And now I want to be clear when we talk about learning from corrections, what we're not talking about is you training somebody's model, somebody's AI model with your data and your corrections. What we're talking about here is the AI that exists for your invoice processing system and how you want to bring that forward, that model and how it works and that tool that works for you should learn when you say no, that is not correct how you've extracted this information. It should learn from that. It should also learn on the other side when you say yes, that's how we code this non-PO backed invoice. Or it learns from, hey, I've approved this invoice in my ERP for this non-PO scenario. You should have a tool that can look at that and go, oh, here's how you've coded these invoices before. I know what that is. This is an invoice from the same company, same information, same stuff like that. I've learned based on what you've done in your system, I can apply that here. And so the AI native is going to be able to source the information, reason, and then apply it in the extraction and the coding of those invoices. Again, non-PO or PO backed. So again, both we're talking about that. So when it does that, as it says, that straight through rate is going to climb because the system is now going to be more and more confident that says, I know what this is. We've done this one before. Lather, rinse, repeat. Bang, bang, bang. And off it goes to your ERP to go through your approval rules just as you have them set up. So that straight through rate climbs. Your team spends less time dealing with those exceptions. Those 18% edge cases, that number comes way down. The number that go all the way through, that number goes way up. And so it really helps you dial in where you want to go. When we talk about exception processing, understanding what is the exception, where does it need to go? Now, if this isn't a supplier in your system or something looks fraudulent or something's way off, I don't want my AI just figuring it out, right? But when there's exceptions to say, gee, this invoice doesn't have any coding on it. What do I do? Well, I can resolve that exception by looking at what you've done historically, right? It's that same thing we talked about in that learning space. It can reference data that exists within your corpus of data, your ecosystem, to answer the questions without having to flag it to you as a human being to be able to go forward and go ahead and grab those. It should be auditable. Every single thing, we talk about this before in some of our other webinars, but when we talk about bringing AI into finance, and our auditors come in, whether they're our internal auditors, our external auditors, or if we're a public organization, we have, public accounting that comes in. When we look at that, we want to make sure our audit teams don't necessarily say, I need a human touching every single thing. What they want is a policy. They want procedures, they want escalations, and they want to see that you've done that. And so you need to make sure your AI native processing, your invoice processing should be auditable. You should be able to see at a click of a button, an extraction of a report, what did the AI do and why did it do it? Right? Is this something it read off the invoice or is it something it imputed based on information that I have within my ERP? right? Everything that happens, every decision, every action is logged in your system and should be auditable and should be findable by you. If there's a black box aspect to any sort of AI that you're evaluating, or you're not really sure, where do I find that audit log? Be careful. This is one where you're not sure what is that AI doing to come up with the answer. I really don't want, it's kind of a, you must show your work. You be able to show your work. I don't need you to show it to me every single time, but if I want to see that work, I need to know where it is to be able to see it. And then governed autonomy. We've talked about this before, but this is, again, you in the control tower of the airport. We need to make sure you have the ability, as the humans on the team, to be able to say, I see what's happening. I understand what's happening throughout. I've set my guardrails. I've set my policies. And all of this orchestration of things within my AP system, my invoicing system, my inquiry management, whatever the case might be, is working. But I have the ability to pause it, look into it, investigate at any point in time. I should always have that capability. And then when policies need to change, I need to put in new rules. I can do that without having to basically open up the engine and rebuild it. And so that needs to be something that I can do on a regular basis on without requiring kind of a capital P IT project. So Nick, any thoughts here in this particular space?
Yeah, would kind of like to kind of even take it down a level because when people think about OCR, optical character recognition, what they forget sometimes is that the C in OCR stands for character, and because OCR looks at each individual character as its own unique thing without understanding the context. So, for example, my first name has a letter I in it, my last name has a letter O in it. A flatbed scanner over here off the screen, I might scan something on my little scanner over here, and it might have a one in my first name and a zero in my last name. Well, guess what? When you have an AI native invoice processing application, it looks at it in context. It knows rules like human beings don't generally have numbers in their names. In the United States, our zip codes generally don't have letters in them, whereas in Canada they might. And so, what's really interesting, in my mind, the takeaway between AI native and OCR is AI is looking at the whole document. It knows that this is a logo and this is an address line and this is a due date and payment terms. And this whole table in the middle is full of line items with quantities and subtotals and totals and tax and VAT and payment instructions. And because the system doesn't look at it on a character by character basis, it looks at it in its totality, it can then make assumptions even though it's never seen that invoice type before, which is a very cool post-template world that we would live in, that we are living in today. The other thing I wanted to point out is that the system will give you a confidence level. So AI is not a zero or a one. It's literally a gradient between zero and one, or zero to 100. And the AI might come back and say, you know what, I felt very confident about this field, but you know what, I wasn't quite as confident about this other field. So I'm not going to completely automate this. I'm going to give this to a human just to double check my work, and I'm going to learn from that the next time. So that when I encounter this again, maybe I can handle it myself and get that confidence level up. So really cool stuff. Again, we'd love to show you some demos of how this stuff works in real life. More to come on that in a future slide today. So take it away, Mike.
Yeah, so moving into our poll question, the next one is again thinking about, where am I at today? Where do I need to move tomorrow as an organization? So what is it that what needs to be true really in order to be able to move off of that template-based capture that I might be using today?
All right. Is it a straight through rate that we can verify once we buy? Is it proof that it handles our PO and edge case invoices? Is it a clean audit trail our controller will sign off on? Maybe it's a business case that survives the CFO or bandwidth. We know it's broken. We can't get to it. So let's give folks another couple of seconds to answer this. Come on, we need a few more people. Is it a straight through rate? Is it proof that it handles non-PO? Is it a clean audit trail? Is it the business case? Or is it bandwidth? I think we could probably end our poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and here we go. So kind of evenly split, although bandwidth is the number one thing. Half the participants on this call said it's bandwidth, and then the other two was proof that it handles PO and edge case invoices, as well as I got to prove this to my CFO.
Yeah, no, that's a big one too, right? And what you really want to be able to look at is say, okay, yeah, that sounds good. How can I get in? How can I prove it quickly? And that's a great opportunity to think about it. And the bandwidth, we know it's broken, we can't get to it. Talk to your providers in terms of what is the lift in order for my team to get something like this in place. you may be surprised that it may not be something quite as heavy duty as you think it might be, that it might be perhaps something that plugs in very easily with your existing ecosystem and your ERP, and be able to do that without necessarily needing a lot of resources on your team side. So that you can be able to start to realize that value early, right? Get in something that's going to start alleviating that pressure valve a little bit for your team that's been adding more and more and more to it, as you kind of dig in. So, yeah, again, some great answers there. Happy to talk more. So what's coming up next for us, Nick?
Yeah, let's talk about how to stay connected during your finance transformation journey. We'd love to walk alongside you on that journey. Transformation Tuesdays, this is the webinar that you're on today. We do them once a month. We also have Transformation Wednesdays. If you're in the UK or Europe, you will see this webcast tomorrow morning on our watch party. I should have mentioned that at the top of the call. My apologies to all our friends on the other side of the pond, but we look forward to presenting this to you tomorrow. You will see us at various events in Las Vegas and New Orleans and a bunch of other places this fall. So come see us in our fall conference season. Lunch and Learn. We do a periodic lunch and learn session on finance automation, including one this Friday that everyone on this call has been automatically enrolled to. So if you do want to see our product in action, this was not a product demonstration. That can be on Friday. We've registered everyone. Please come and we'll buy you lunch. You get a $25 Grubhub card, and you can see an awesome demo of the product. And then finally, another final resource for you is that, as I said at the beginning of the call, today's recording and slides will be popping into your inbox later this week. With that, let's dig in more, Mike.
Yeah,
Uh,
so in terms of digging in more, right? What we want to do is help you figure out what's next, right? You talk about I'm stuck. I need something that's going to survive my CFO's bullets as they fire them back at us, or I need to be able to prove it. Right? Let's talk about what that automation is going to look like. Let's talk about this in that space. So that's, as we've talked on some of these Transformation Tuesday webinars before, that's one of my responsibilities here at Auditoria is to actually work with folks to understand what that strategy should look like. Let's talk about where are you ready for AI, where you maybe want to make some changes. Let's talk about your roadmap. Let's talk about change management and ROI so that we can get those things that we can count so that we can prove that value to our CFO to allow him or her to give us some money to actually invest in these capabilities. So my information is here. Happy to connect up on LinkedIn or otherwise, or you can reach out to me on email. And happy to get that scheduled with you to talk about what that might look like to help you move forward. So with that, enough of us talking. Let's hear about what's on your minds. So as we talked about, there is the Q&A function down below. So happy to hear any Q&A that you might have. I know we have a couple of questions that have come through so far.
yeah. I can jump in there, Mike. There's a couple questions that were similar, so I'm going to go ahead and paraphrase it. Based on the people who are on this call today, it seems like a lot of people are in pain with their current legacy OCR system. What is, in your opinion, a good first step for them to take? I mean, other than attending this webinar and potentially coming to our lunch and learn, how does somebody actually begin on this journey to replace their current system with something new?
Yeah. So, I mean, when we're talking about systems, right? If you're talking about, hopefully, there's ERP level replacements, which is a capital P project. And that's going to be a multi-year endeavor that you're going to be looking into. But if you're looking at those tools that you may have purchased before that are attached into your ERP systems, those are very easy to talk through. So, again, that's an opportunity to think about, okay, go through that kind of section 4 that we talked about. What is it doing for me? Where is it going? Can I assess what those capabilities are? How much of that time am I spending maintaining the system? Another piece of duct tape, another piece of scotch tape that's going into that. If I'm doing that, that's a great place to start to say, okay, what could I do? Talk to somebody, talk to me, talk to Nick. Let's talk about what might be an option for you to be able to think about where you might be able to go next. And then you can start to take a look at some of those there. But it's really saying, okay, being honest with yourselves to say, what is my team actually doing? And if you're kind of up the management level a little bit, maybe you're not seeing this. Again, delicately, but start to ask some of those questions of your team saying, hey, how is this going for y'all? How are you doing with processing? How is that? how is that going for you? And and if it's truly a big pain point for them, let's it's time to probably start taking some action, and let's have a conversation on what to do next, kind of in terms of that space. So again, reach out to folks that are kind of professionals in the space and kind of we live this every day. So let's have a conversation about where we might be able to help you, get unstuck and be able to give you some more time back in your AP team's day.
Here's another one for you, Mike. And I know this has come up in several conversations you've had. I know I've had this conversation before, but we run into people all the time who've just replaced their legacy on-prem ERP with a modern, shiny, fancy cloud-based ERP. And in many cases, they expect that this new ERP system that they just spent 2 years in implementing, it has some advanced OCR or invoice digitization capabilities. What do you say for the folks who are like, hey, I think I've got this already in my ERP?
So, in many cases, what you probably have is partial. And it's again, there's a lot of things. So you think about that brand new, you've bought the Cadillac, right? You parked it in the garage. It's beautiful. You're ready to go. It's all implemented. But understand, there's a lot of features in that Cadillac. You may be really interested in that cup holder in the third row, but in reality, right, they've spent a lot of time looking at the paint job. They've looked at some other pieces, the wheels, the stuff that's, the sexy stuff that's up there, and perhaps the engine that makes it move in finance hasn't gotten as much attention. So understand that when we talk about these tools, most of them are going to live right alongside that shiny new ERP that you've already done. So you've brought in that best in class system, and what you really want to now do is maximize your investment in it. What you may have within those tools are good, they might be solid, but you may have a level of complexity or volume or other things that may require, again, a best-in-class, purpose-built tool that's out there. Again, you can't just slap, again, being in finance, all of you can't just throw random things at financial problems. You need financial solutions for financial problems, for finance problems rather. And so you want to make sure those solutions are purpose built to help us process, help us move forward in a finance space. And so really encourage you to think about that. Understanding too, some of those tools may have things that, oh, hey, it's on the roadmap. And you're like, cool, but I have a problem today. 40% of you said, I can't even get past my problem today to even think about waiting for something downrange. And so you have a problem today, and waiting for roadmap items isn't where you want to be. So you really want to, find an opportunity for something that's available, it's on the shelf today, and it's going to work with that shiny new ERP that you've put in place.
Last question, Mike. I think we have just 2 or 3 minutes for it. I'll combine a couple of them together. So let's say somebody wants to embark on this journey. Talk about the effort involved with implementing something like this, and both in terms of time to value, as well as percentages of accuracy rates that they might experience out of the gate, and then how will that grow over time as the system starts to learn from its own data?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of timing, right, the best thing you want to do is kind of get into kind of a quick scoping conversation. Like, what are we talking about? What does that mix look like between what you have today, what you don't have? How much is problematic today, right? All of that is going to help you drive what does automation day one look like for me out of the box versus what I couldn't get to, right? So to answer the question, Nick, that you've posed. Initially, you're probably going to start to see something again, kind of in that space where you want to see, 40 to 45 to 50% initially. But then again, as we start to say, here's the corrections, it's learning based on, I've got information in my ecosystem, be able to move that forward. We see a lot of people who are starting to automate touchless AP straight through invoice processing that starts to creep into that 75, 80, 85, 90% range for some organizations. And then that's going to really take that pressure off of your team, and you're going to really start to see that value. And that's really it's a holistic solution, right? It's not just tech. It's looking at my policy, my process, my procedures, how we do work, how we ask our suppliers to send us information, how our internal teams process that. So that holistic solution really allows us to supercharge that automation, that straight through processing. So it's kind of we're not just gonna, if you think about it as if it was a medical problem, right? We're not just gonna put a couple of butterfly sutures across it and say we're good. We need to make sure what's underneath and what's causing that trouble, we can make that better so that you can see that real value in the patient going forward.
Well stated, and I think that will leave you with the last word there, Mike. So I think that does it for us here on Transformation Tuesdays for August 2026. On behalf of Mike, myself, the whole Auditoria team, and all the AI agents who are backing us up, thanks for enjoying the time with us today, and please enjoy the rest of your day.